My own family ambushed me at dinner to steal my home office for my unemployed dropout brother's streaming pipe dreams. The same office where I'd been working 60-hour weeks as a web developer to fund their comfortable lifestyle for 2 years. Dad delivered the news like a CEO announcing layoffs, while Mom nodded along like taking my workspace was just common sense family planning. The betrayal cut deep because I'd been bleeding money to keep this household afloat while they treated me like an inconvenience. $24,800 over 2 years. Furnace repairs, car transmissions, deck materials, groceries, utilities, all funded by my paychecks while I got lectured about family obligations whenever I hesitated to open my wallet again. But watching Ethan's smug satisfaction was the worst part. My 19-year-old brother sat there scrolling his phone with 7 Twitch followers, grinning like he'd just inherited a kingdom instead of demanding space in a house he'd never contributed a penny toward. Mom and Dad beamed at their golden child like he was launching the next tech startup instead of asking for handouts to support his gaming hobby. Ethan needs a proper streaming setup, Mom explained with that tone parents use when they're about to sacrifice one child for another. You can work anywhere with a laptop, but he needs dedicated space for equipment and lighting. It just makes sense. They thought they had me trapped, that their family ATM would just quietly move to the kitchen table and keep funding their dreams while my own workspace got handed over to the golden child who'd never earned anything in his life. What they didn't know was that I'd been documenting every dollar, planning every detail, and preparing for the conversation that would end their free ride forever. When I said I'd clear out my office, they thought they were getting exactly what they wanted. They had no idea I was about to clear out a lot more than just my desk. To understand how my family could casually steal my workspace over dinner, you need to know about the dynamic that had ruled our household since Ethan was born. He was the golden child whose dreams always came first, whose failures were always someone else's fault, and whose needs always trumped everyone else's reality. When Ethan dropped out of college after one semester, it was because the professors didn't understand his creative vision. When his YouTube channel failed after 3 months, it was because the algorithm was rigged against new creators. When his part-time job at GameStop ended after 2 weeks, it was because his manager was threatened by his entrepreneurial spirit. Meanwhile, my web development success was treated like a lucky accident that came with family obligations. Every promotion meant higher expectations for what I should contribute. Every raise meant bigger requests for temporary help that somehow never got paid back. Ethan was the golden child whose dreams I was expected to fund while my own success was treated like a family resource. The pattern was always the same. Someone would have a crisis, the furnace would break, Dad's transmission would fail, the deck would need repairs, and suddenly I'd get the family meeting about how we all need to pitch in and family helps family. Except somehow I was the only one pitching in actual money while everyone else pitched in opinions about how I should spend it. $2,700 for the furnace last winter, $1,800 for Dad's car repair in the spring, $1,100 for deck materials that Ethan was supposedly going to help install but never touched. Each time the request came with promises about paying me back when things settle down or after the next paycheck. I'd become the family ATM dispensing cash for everyone else's problems while my own needs got pushed aside for the golden child's latest project. But the most insidious part was how they weaponized family loyalty to justify the constant exploitation. Where family became their magic phrase for accessing my wallet, their universal excuse for why my boundaries didn't matter and my financial independence was somehow selfish. Every time I hesitated to hand over money, I'd get lectures about family values and how successful people have obligations to help their relatives. Every time I suggested maybe Ethan should get a real job, I'd hear about how not everyone can be lucky enough to work in tech and how family means supporting each other's dreams. Where family became their magic phrase for accessing my wallet, but apparently family meant I gave and they took. The crisis that led to my office being confiscated started with Ethan's latest streaming failure. After 3 months of building his brand with equipment I'd helped pay for, his Twitch channel had 7 followers and 0 revenue. Instead of getting a real job like any normal person would, he decided the problem was his setup, specifically that he needed a dedicated streaming room with professional lighting and soundproofing. Of course, this became a family emergency that required immediate intervention. According to Mom and Dad, Ethan was so close to a breakthrough and just needed the right environment to showcase his talent to the world. Never mind that his talent seemed to consist mainly of playing video games while mumbling into a microphone. Ethan's streaming career was failing so naturally it became my problem to fix with my office space. The family meeting happened on a Tuesday night, perfectly choreographed over dinner when I couldn't escape. Dad cleared his throat like he was about to deliver important corporate news, while Mom sat there with that expression she used when she was about to ask for something unreasonable, but expected me to be grateful for the opportunity to help. We've been thinking about Ethan's streaming career. Dad began like this was a serious business discussion instead of enabling a 19-year-old's gaming hobby. He's got real potential, but he needs proper space to create content. Your office has the best lighting and acoustics in the house. Ethan nodded along like this made perfect sense, already mentally redecorating my workspace with his gaming setup and LED strips. The entitlement was breathtaking. He'd never contributed a penny to this household, but somehow deserved the best room in the house for his hobby. Ethan needs a proper setup, and you can work from anywhere, Mom added, sealing the deal in her mind. That's when I surprised them all by not arguing, not negotiating, not trying to explain why my actual career might be more important than Ethan's streaming fantasies. Okay, I said calmly. I'll clear it out. I said okay, and they thought they'd won, but they had no idea what clearing out really meant. The next morning, my family was practically celebrating their victory over breakfast. Mom had already started browsing furniture websites for Ethan's new streaming room, while Dad discussed acoustic panel installations like he was planning a professional recording studio. They talked around me, not to me, as if I'd already been erased from the equation. We should paint the walls a darker color, Mom suggested enthusiastically. I saw this YouTuber who had a really cool setup with LED backlighting. Ethan, what do you think about navy blue? Ethan nodded along like he was designing his personal empire instead of taking over space in a house his parents owned and I funded. The speed with which they'd moved from asking permission to making renovation plans was breathtaking, but not surprising. They celebrated taking my space like they'd accomplished something, instead of just bullying me into another sacrifice for the golden child. But the real insult came when they expected me to fund the office conversion. Dad casually mentioned that I should pitch in for the renovation costs, since it would improve the house value, and I was part of the family. The audacity was staggering. They'd stolen my workspace and now wanted me to pay for the privilege of losing it. The paint and lighting will probably run about $400, Dad said over his coffee like he was discussing the weather. We figured you could cover that since you're the one with the steady income. Just think of it as an investment in Ethan's future. An investment in Ethan's future. Using my money to fund the takeover of my office so my dropout brother could play video games for 7 people on Twitch. The golden child system had reached peak absurdity, but they said it with such casual entitlement that they clearly expected me to agree. You should pitch in for the renovations since you're family. Like stealing my office wasn't enough. I should pay for the privilege too. Ethan's behavior throughout this process revealed everything about his character. He didn't thank me for giving up my workspace, didn't offer to help with moving my equipment, didn't even pretend to feel awkward about taking something that wasn't his. Instead, he acted like inheriting my office was his birthright as the family's golden child. I'm thinking about getting one of those standing desk setups, he told Mom while I sat right there eating breakfast. And maybe we could move that bookshelf out since I'll need the wall space for my monitors. Oh, and we should probably get better curtains for streaming during the day. He was already mentally redecorating my office planning purchases with money he didn't have, making demands about a space he hadn't earned. 26 years old and watching my 19-year-old brother claim ownership of everything I'd worked for. Ethan acted like taking my office was his birthright, planning renovations for space he'd never earned or paid for. Meanwhile, I started quietly complying with their takeover, packing my equipment, and organizing my files while they planned their streaming empire. But what they didn't notice was how methodically I was documenting everything. Not just moving my desk, but preparing for a much bigger change than anyone realized. I started clearing out while they planned their takeover, but I was preparing for something much bigger than they imagined. While my family spent the week planning Ethan's streaming empire in my soon-to-be former office, I spent it apartment hunting online. Every evening after work, while they discussed LED lighting arrangements and soundproofing options, I was browsing rental listings and calculating security deposits for my escape plan. The irony was beautiful. They thought I was sulking about losing my workspace, but I was actually planning my complete departure from their exploitation system. One-bedroom apartments with dedicated office space were surprisingly affordable when you weren't funding 3 other adults' lifestyle choices. Within 5 days, I'd found the perfect place, a modern apartment with a separate office room, better lighting than my current setup, and most importantly, no family members demanding I fund their hobbies. While they planned my office's future, I was planning my own, and they had no idea how permanent my clearing out was going to be. The financial documentation process was eye-opening in the most depressing way possible. I pulled 2 years of bank statements, receipts, and transaction records to calculate exactly how much being the family ATM had cost me. The numbers were staggering and infuriating. $24,800 over 2 years, not including the countless grocery runs, utility payments, and small emergencies that never got tracked because they seemed minor at the time. The furnace repair alone was $2,700. Dad's transmission was $1,800. The deck materials were $1,100 plus. I'd spent 3 weekends actually building the thing while Ethan played video games. But the real kicker was realizing that in all those transactions, all those family emergencies, not one person had ever said thank you or acknowledged that I was keeping this household functional with my paycheck. $24,800 over 2 years, and they thought I should be grateful for the opportunity to keep giving. Moving preparations happened in plain sight, but my family was so focused on their streaming room plans that they missed all the obvious signs. I started boxing up my personal belongings, organizing important documents, and quietly transferring utilities to my name only. Not that anyone noticed, since I was the only one who ever dealt with bills anyway. The apartment deposit went through on Thursday. The moving truck was scheduled for Saturday. My new internet installation was confirmed for Monday morning. Every piece of my exit strategy was falling into place while they debated whether Ethan needed a green screen or just better lighting. Every box I packed was another step toward freedom, and they were too excited about their takeover to notice. The final insult came Friday night when Dad approached me about funding the office renovation, not asking, informing me that they'd already ordered the paint and acoustic panels, assuming I'd cover the $400 bill because family helps family, and I was the successful one. "We figured you'd want to contribute to making the space really professional," he said, like I should be honored to pay for losing my office. "Think of it as an investment in the family's future. When Ethan's channel takes off, you'll be glad you helped make it happen." The audacity was breathtaking, but I just nodded and told him I'd figure it out. They took that as agreement, but I had a very different interpretation of what figuring it out meant. They asked for money to renovate the office they'd stolen from me, and I said I'd figure it out, but not how they expected. Saturday morning, I sat at my kitchen table with 2 years of financial records spread out like evidence in a criminal case. Bank statements, receipts, canceled checks, and credit card bills. Every transaction that had flowed from my account to keep this family afloat while they treated me like an inconvenience. The itemized list took 3 hours to compile, but it was worth every minute for the brutal clarity it provided. Furnace repair, $2,700. Dad's transmission replacement, $1,800. Deck materials and labor, $1,100. Emergency grocery runs when Mom's card got declined, $400. Ethan's temporary phone bill that I'd been paying for 8 months, $320. Line by line, dollar by dollar, the evidence of 2 years of financial exploitation. Not loans, gifts that were never acknowledged, never appreciated, never reciprocated. Just expected like breathing. Like I was a natural resource they could harvest whenever convenient. Every dollar I'd given them, itemized and dated, told the story of a family that had confused my generosity with weakness. The moving truck arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, just as I'd planned. 2 professional movers started loading my desk computer equipment and bedroom furniture while my family was still eating the breakfast I'd bought with groceries I'd paid for. The sound of furniture being carried downstairs finally got their attention. "What's all that noise?" Mom called from the kitchen, but I was already directing traffic with the movers, making sure my expensive computer setup got wrapped properly and my office chair didn't get scratched. This equipment represented my livelihood, my independence, and my ticket out of their exploitation system. Dad appeared in the doorway just as my desk disappeared around the corner, his coffee mug frozen halfway to his mouth as reality started sinking in. The moving truck arrived while they were still planning to use my office, and suddenly my clearing out started looking a lot more permanent. The look of confusion on Dad's face was priceless when he realized this wasn't just me moving my stuff to make room for Ethan's gaming setup. This was me moving my stuff out of the house entirely. Mom came running upstairs still holding her breakfast plate, staring at the movers like they were aliens. "Ryan, what's going on?" she asked with growing panic. "Why are they taking your bed?" "I told you I'd clear out the office," I said calmly, watching my bookshelf get loaded onto the truck. "I'm clearing out completely, found a nice apartment with a better office space." The silence that followed was beautiful. You could actually see the wheels turning in their heads as they realized what losing their family ATM really meant. That's when they realized clearing out meant leaving entirely, and their family ATM was about to close its doors forever. But the real masterpiece was the list I'd prepared for this exact moment. $24,800 itemized by date and category, printed on nice paper and ready for presentation. I pulled it from my folder and stuck it to the refrigerator with the same Disney World magnet Mom had used to display Ethan's elementary school artwork. "Thought you might want to see what family support actually looks like in dollar amounts," I said, tapping the paper. 2 years of contributions. You can keep it as a reminder of what you had. The list stuck to the fridge told them exactly what losing their family ATM was going to cost them. Everything. Their reactions were immediate and predictable. Dad's face went through several shades of pale as he scanned the numbers. Mom started making those little gasping sounds people make when they're trying not to cry in public. Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway, took one look at the list, and actually had the nerve to ask if this meant he wasn't getting his streaming room. The golden child was more worried about losing his gaming setup than losing his brother, which told me everything I needed to know about my decision. They finally understood what losing their family ATM really meant, and Ethan was only worried about his streaming room. The guilt campaign started immediately, with all 3 family members taking turns trying to emotionally manipulate me back into my role as their personal funding source. Mom led with tears and family obligation speeches, reminding me how disappointed she was that I'd abandon family over something as trivial as office space. "We're family, Ryan," she kept saying through practiced sobs. "Family doesn't just walk away when things get difficult. We've always been there for each other, and now when we need you most, you're running away like we don't matter." The irony was staggering. They'd been there for each other by taking everything I offered and demanding more, but somehow I was the one abandoning family by refusing to continue funding their lifestyle while getting nothing but demands in return. "We're family" lost all meaning when they treated me like an ATM instead of a person they actually cared about. But the real panic set in when they started calculating what losing me would actually cost them. Dad pulled out his calculator and started adding up monthly expenses. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, car insurance, all the bills that had somehow become my responsibility over the past 2 years. "We can't afford the house payment without your contribution," he admitted with growing desperation. "And the utilities and the groceries. Ryan, you can't just leave us hanging like this. We planned our budget around your help." They'd planned their entire lifestyle around my paycheck without ever asking if I wanted to be their permanent financial support system. 2 years of taking my money had become so normal, they'd forgotten it was generosity, not obligation. They'd never planned for a life without my wallet, and reality was hitting them like a freight train. Ethan's reaction was the most revealing and the most pathetic. Instead of showing any concern about losing his brother, his only worry was whether he'd still get his streaming room set up. The golden child had been so thoroughly spoiled that he couldn't comprehend why his personal ATM was malfunctioning. "But what about my streaming equipment?" he whined like I was being unreasonable for not funding his hobby after moving out. "You said you'd help me get started, and now you're just bailing because of some stupid argument about office space." The complete lack of self-awareness was breathtaking. He genuinely believed that taking my office and demanding I pay for the renovation was a stupid argument rather than the final straw in 2 years of systematic exploitation. Ethan's golden child status crumbled the moment his funding disappeared, and he still only cared about losing his gaming setup. Meanwhile, I was experiencing freedom I hadn't felt in 2 years. My new apartment was quiet, organized, and mine. My bank account was growing instead of shrinking. My office space was exactly what I needed for work without anyone demanding I give it up for their hobbies. For the first time since I'd started supporting this family, every dollar I earned stayed in my account unless I chose to spend it. No emergency requests, no guilt trips, no lectures about family obligations. Just me, my work, and my money. For the first time in years, my money was mine alone, and the peace was incredible. The final confrontation happened in the kitchen 3 days after I'd moved out when my family cornered me during my last visit to collect some forgotten items. They'd clearly planned this intervention, positioning themselves around the refrigerator where my itemized list still hung like a financial death certificate for their comfortable lifestyle. Dad started with his authoritative voice, the same one he'd used when demanding my office space, but now it carried desperation instead of confidence. Mom flanked my other side, ready with tears and emotional manipulation. Ethan lurked in the doorway, probably hoping this meeting would restore his streaming room dreams. They surrounded me in the kitchen like I was the problem instead of the solution they'd been exploiting for 2 years. "Let's talk about this list," Dad said, tapping the paper with $24,800 worth of evidence. "These numbers are impressive. We didn't realize you'd been keeping track of everything so carefully. But family doesn't keep score like this, Ryan. We help each other because that's what family does." I pulled out my copy of the same list and started reading the entries aloud, my voice calm and steady as I delivered 2 years of financial documentation like evidence in court. Furnace repair, December 2022, $2,700. Dad's transmission replacement, March 2023, $1,800. Deck materials and 3 weekends of my labor, June 2023, $1,100 plus 40 hours of work. I kept reading, watching their faces grow paler with each entry. Ethan's phone bill ongoing since April 2023, $320 and counting. The kitchen fell silent except for my voice documenting their systematic exploitation of my generosity. $24,800 over 2 years, I concluded, and not once did anyone say thank you. That's when the desperate bargaining began, with Mom and Dad offering sudden compromises they'd never considered when they thought they had me trapped. Mom promised I could have my office back if I moved home. Dad offered to work out a payment plan for some of the money, conveniently ignoring that these had been gifts, not loans. "We can make changes," Mom pleaded, her voice thick with panic. "You can have the master bedroom. We'll give you more space, more privacy. We didn't realize you felt unappreciated. We're grateful for everything you've done, and we want to do better." Dad nodded along enthusiastically. "We'll sit down and budget properly this time. Create boundaries about money requests. You'll still be part of the family decisions, and we'll respect your space and your contributions." The promises flowed like water from people who'd never shown this consideration when they thought their ATM was permanent. "We can work something out, you're still family," they begged, but their sudden respect only proved they'd been taking advantage all along. That's when I delivered the statement that would end this conversation permanently. "Family doesn't mean being your personal ATM," I said, my voice carrying the authority of someone who'd finally learned his worth. "For 2 years, I funded your lifestyle, covered your emergencies, and supported your dreams while you treated my generosity like obligation. You took my money, my space, and my respect, and the only thing you're sorry about is losing access to my wallet." I looked at each of them in turn. Real family appreciates each other. Real family says thank you. Real family doesn't steal office space and then demand renovation funding. You had a brother and a son who would have helped you forever, but you wanted an ATM instead. Family doesn't mean being your personal ATM anymore, and the finality in my voice made it clear the bank was permanently closed. But Ethan's reaction revealed everything about his true character. Instead of any remorse about losing his brother, his only concern was whether this meant he'd never get his streaming equipment. The golden child who'd been handed everything his whole life couldn't understand why his funding source was malfunctioning. "So that's it," he said with genuine confusion. "You're really gonna let some stupid fight about office space destroy our family? I was counting on that streaming setup, Ryan. You know how important this is to my career." The complete lack of self-awareness was stunning. He still thought this was about office space rather than years of exploitation. He still called his hobby a career while having never earned a dollar from it. Ethan only cared about losing his funding, not losing his brother, and that told me everything about my decision. I handed Dad the house key I'd had since college, the one that symbolized my membership in this family unit. "The ATM is closed permanently," I said, walking toward the door. "You'll have to figure out life without my wallet." I walked away from being their family ATM forever, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. The aftermath of my departure hit my family exactly as hard as the numbers had predicted. Within 2 months, they'd fallen behind on the mortgage payment. The utilities got disconnected twice for non-payment. Dad's car started making ominous noises that he couldn't afford to fix, and Mom's grocery budget became a masterclass in creative rationing. Ethan's streaming dreams evaporated along with his funding source. The office space sat empty except for his old gaming chair and a desk lamp, a monument to entitlement that reality had finally crushed. Without my financial support, the golden child had to get his first real job at a local electronics store where his managers were significantly less impressed with his entrepreneurial vision than his parents had been. Without my money, they had to figure out real life, and the golden child learned what actual work looked like. Meanwhile, my bank account grew steadily for the first time in 2 years. My new apartment became exactly what I'd always wanted, a peaceful workspace where I could focus on advancing my career without constant interruptions for family emergencies that somehow always required my wallet to solve. I got promoted to senior developer 6 months later, an advancement that would have been impossible when I was constantly stressed about money and family drama. My savings account hit 5 figures for the first time ever. My work-life balance actually became balanced. My bank account and my stress levels both improved dramatically once I stopped funding their lifestyle. Looking back, the most valuable lesson wasn't about money or family boundaries. It was about recognizing the difference between being generous and being exploited. I'd spent 2 years confusing their entitlement with my obligation, their demands with my duty. Real family appreciates generosity instead of expecting it. Real family says thank you instead of demanding more. Real family supports each other's success instead of treating one person as a resource to be harvested. Being family doesn't mean being someone's personal ATM. It means mutual respect, gratitude, and support that flows both ways.